Welcome to this lecture within the Human Rights and Economic Cooperation in Europe, and this lecture deals with the Charter and in what way that plays a role within the economic cooperation of Europe. The strange thing was that, however, the EU was very important, they were not a member to any of the human rights conventions, not the UN nor the European Convention. So the parties within the European Union deemed it necessary to make, let's say, their own convention or treaty or charter, as it was named in the end, a charter that would really deal with fundamental rights within the European Union. So they agreed in the years 1999-2000 to make, let's say, an underlying fundamental rights provisions which would be incorporated within the treaties of the European Union. And this was necessary because the fundamental rights within the European economic cooperation were deemed to be very necessary. So within the European Council, that's the meeting of all chiefs of each European country, they were making an agreement that they would compose a body which was called the European Convention, and this European Convention was very quick in making a text for a European Charter. The strange thing, however, was that although it was made within and through the heads of state of all European Union countries, the legal status between 2000 and 2009 was uncertain. They didn't know how this charter would play a role in the legal environment of the European Union. But to make things clear, it became an integral part on the Lisbon Treaty, which came into force on December the 1st, 2009. What is important to understand is that through this, not only the European Convention on Human Rights, which came into being through the Council of Europe, that within the European economic cooperation embodied in the European Union, also human rights, fundamental rights became important. Also for the institutions of the EU itself. So the Charter, the fundamental rights, apply to, of course, all citizens within the European Union, and it applies to member states, and it applies to the institution of the European Union. And what is also important is under EU law, data protection is now as a distinct fundamental right acknowledged. In two ways, the function of the treaty, or the treaty of the function of the European Union, has in Article 16 a reference to instructing that all EU institutions have to respect privacy and data protection, and they also have aimed at the member states. And in Article 7 and 8 of the Charter, the privacy protection is being regulated, so to speak, for all people that are within the European Union. What then also appeared to be important, on the one hand, most European countries, more than only the countries that were part of the European Union, had the European Convention on Human Rights within the Council of Europe. The 28 countries within the European Union had now, as of 2009, their own fundamental rights charter. So what to do with this? Because most of the European, or all European countries are part of the Council of Europe also, and thus of the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, well, to make things go smoother, there was a special article, namely Article 52, that arranged for the way how to deal with when there was something in the European Convention on the one hand, or there was something within the Charter, how to deal with concurrence, as it is called, when these rights the same when they are written down in a somewhat different manner. So Article 52 is more or less an instruction to both the court in Strasbourg, the European Court of Human Rights, as well as to the Court of Justice of the European Union in Luxembourg. So there's two texts. They are almost identical, but for privacy, and I will come to that and try to explain that, for privacy and data protection there is difference between the two texts, and that's probably going to be important over the next few years. So I will explain that in one of the next modules. There's also two courts, but I explained that how they are going to use Article 52 to keep the cases and the judgments in line with each other. So this concludes the lecture on the human rights and economic cooperation in Europe as considering the Charter within the European Union on the fundamental rights. And the next lecture will deal with specific enactments and how privacy has become part in separate rules within the European Union.